All right, everyone, get ready, because we are diving head first into the world of wheat today. And let me tell you, this one's a doozy.
Yeah, this isn't your typical deep dive material.
Not at all. Remember how you all requested we unpack this? Well, buckle up, because we're dealing with cryptic fragments of text, a book intro that's more like a riddle wrapped in an enigma, and to top it all off, a PDF simply titled, Get This.
It's like trying to decipher a dream. A really, really fragmented dream.
And that's precisely what makes this deep dive so captivating, right? It's like Vaidy is holding up a shattered mirror to, well, our equally shattered world.
And forcing us to piece it back together ourselves, one shard at a time.
Exactly. And speaking of shards, one of the first things that struck me was this recurring image of stones. I mean, they're everywhere in Vaidy's work, almost like a breadcrumb trail, leading us through this labyrinth of thought.
And it's not just the frequency, it's the way Sandy uses them. Like in the draft intro for it, they describe these stones as microcosms, little pockets of thought and experience, almost like...
Like each stone is a tweet, a headline, a fleeting thought in the digital deluge.
Exactly. Which makes the title even more intriguing, don't you think? Those brackets. They look like two stones side by side, right?
Wow, you're right. I never thought of it that way, but it makes total sense. It's like Sandy is giving us a visual clue, hinting at this idea of fragmented information, these little bursts of meaning we have to piece together.
And the way these stones are presented, not in a linear narrative, but scattered, fragmented, it's like how we experience the world now, right?
Yep.
Constantly bombarded with information from all sides.
Yeah, it's overwhelming, like trying to drink from a fire hose. And it makes you wonder, what does that do to us? To our sense of time, our grip on reality? I mean, there's this one line, space has expanded faster than time. That really stuck with me. It's like Damami is saying that our digital lives are warping our perception of time itself.
It's like that constant state of information overload is stretching our minds thin, making it harder and harder to distinguish the real from the virtual, the meaningful from the mundane.
And what happens to our humanity in all of this? Are we losing something essential about ourselves in this digital frenzy? Or are we evolving into something entirely new?
These are questions that have haunted humanity for centuries, and Johnny is grappling with them in a way that's both unsettling and incredibly relevant to our current moment.
Especially when you consider the way Kadoji combines these heady themes of time, reality, and the human condition with this, well, this almost jarring juxtaposition of poetic language and violence.
It's a fascinating contrast, isn't it? On one hand, you have these beautifully crafted phrases, almost lyrical in their rhythm and imagery.
And then, bam, you're hit with a line like, which roughly translates to, when words fail, violence steps in.
It's like Sinde is holding up a mirror to the duality of human nature, to the potential for both beauty and brutality that exists within us all.
It's like they're saying that even with all our technological advancements, we're still at the mercy of our primal instincts, still capable of great violence and destruction.
And that perhaps, in a world increasingly defined by technology, it's even more important to remember our capacity for both.
It's almost like QD is warning us, saying, hey, this isn't just some intellectual exercise, folks. This stuff has teeth.
Right. It's like a punch to the gut, forcing you to confront the rawness, the brutality that still lurks beneath the surface of our supposedly civilized world.
Yeah. And that line we talked about earlier, Upratonium Neokadiu, which translates to, we prefer to kill so as not to be killed. It's chilling, but man, it gets under your skin.
It's like COD is tapping into something primal, something deeply unsettling about the human condition, this kind of kill or be killed mentality.
Yeah, and placing it right alongside these incredibly beautiful, thought-provoking passages. It's a jarring contrast, but it's effective. You can't look away.
Exactly. It's like they're creating this kind of cognitive dissonance, this clash between beauty and brutality, and it forces you to pay attention. You can't just passively consume this work. You have to actively engage with it.
And that brings us to another layer in all of this, right? This whole thing with technology, AI in particular. It pops up constantly throughout Hinadi's work.
Almost like this ominous undercurrent, right? This sense that technology, particularly AI, has this incredible power to shape our future, for better or worse.
You really get the sense that Hinadi is wrestling with these same questions we all have about AI. Is it going to be our savior or our downfall? Will it elevate humanity or render us completely obsolete?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think AD captures that tension beautifully, that sense of both awe and apprehension that we feel towards this rapidly evolving technology.
Remember that line, the system of systems of systems? It always gives me chills. It's like, who's really in control? Us or the systems we've created?
It's like we've built this incredibly complex machine, this digital ecosystem, and now it's starting to take on a life of its own. And we're not entirely sure we like where it's going.
And then there's that other line, right? The one about the bionetwork.
Yeah.
Something about this long night, this merging of flesh and tech.
Yeah.
It's both fascinating and terrifying.
Yeah, like where does the human end and the machine begin? Are we blurring those lines, maybe even erasing them entirely?
It's like stepping into uncharted territory, right? This weird fusion of biology and technology. It makes you wonder what it even means to be human in the age of AI.
It's a question without an easy answer, and I think that's what makes Sayedi's exploration of this theme so compelling. They're not trying to preach or give us a definitive answer. They're forcing us to confront the ambiguity, the uncertainty.
And they do it all within this incredibly unique linguistic framework. I mean, the way they use language is just as unconventional as the ideas they're exploring.
It's like they're playing with language, bending it, breaking it, reshaping it to fit their own purposes.
You've got repetition, unconventional punctuation, Russian words popping up in the middle of English sentences. It's almost like they're creating a whole new language from scratch.
It's like they're saying that traditional language, the way we're used to communicating, just isn't adequate anymore. It's too limited, too linear, too confined by rules and conventions.
It's like that line, social
Yeah.
seeing that word for loneliness repeated over and over, stretched out like that. It evokes this visceral feeling of isolation, this sense of being utterly alone in a world that's supposed to be hyper-connected.
Absolutely. It's not just the words themselves. It's the way they're arranged, the way they're delivered, the way they disrupt our expectations.
Yeah.
It's like Sonadi is taking a sledgehammer to the structure of language itself, forcing us to confront the raw materials, the building blocks of meaning.
And it makes you realize language is powerful,
Yeah.
right? I mean, this is how we understand the world, how we connect with each other. It can build bridges, but it can also...
Wait, what?
Exactly. And Gurney understands that. Remember that line. Gurney understands that. Remember that line. Ruri, Gruji, Guni. It just hits you in the gut.
That repetition, that rawness, it's like they're reminding us that language is never far removed from the visceral realities of the human experience.
Right. Like words have weight. They have consequences. And in a world saturated with information, it's easy to forget that, to get lost in the noise, which maybe is Zhaoji's point. Like, they're forcing us to reevaluate the role of language itself.
Absolutely. It's like they're asking, how do we find meaning in a world where language is constantly shifting, fragmenting, being manipulated? How do we filter the signal from the noise?
Especially when the noise is getting louder every day. I mean, we're bombarded with information from all sides, and it's not always easy to tell what's real, what's true, what's worth paying attention to.
It's like trying to have a conversation in a crowded room where everyone's shouting different things at the same time. And maybe, just maybe, ID is suggesting that the only way to make sense of it all is to start by questioning the very tools we use to understand it.
To question language itself.
Wow.
It's like they're saying, don't take anything for granted, not even the words we use.
Exactly. And that's a pretty powerful message. It's a call to be more critical, more discerning, more aware of the power of language, both its potential and its limitations.
It's like they're saying, wake up, pay attention. The world is changing faster than ever, and the way we communicate, the way we understand ourselves and each other needs to keep pace.
And that's not an easy task. It's messy, it's challenging, and there's no one-size-fits-all solution. But the first step, as Eddie reminds us, is to be aware, to be engaged, to never stop questioning.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the mind-bending world of Shadi, we're left with more questions than answers, which, in a way, feels fitting.
Absolutely. Because the questions themselves are often more valuable than the answers. They force us to think differently, to look beyond the surface, to embrace uncertainty.
And in a world that often feels increasingly uncertain, maybe that's the most important lesson we can take away from Shadi's work. To embrace the unknown, to question the familiar, and to never stop exploring the endless possibilities of language and the human experience.
And on that note, until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.